GetsuFumaDen Undying Moon is the latest roguelike hack-and-slash action game from Konami. That's right, Konami, the company that are more known for pachinko machines than for video games nowadays. Rest in peace, Konami of old. But with GetsuFumaDen Undying Moon, they are looking to get back into the video game scene with a reboot of their property, GetsuFumaDen, which was a 2D action game released only in Japan on the Famicom back in 1987. For those of you interested in the original, if you purchase the digital deluxe version of Undying Moon, you do gain access to the 1987 version, which includes an added English menu, though in-game text remains in Japanese only, so be warned. The only thing Undying Moon has in common with its predecessor though is its name, thanks to a completely revamped gameplay loop and new roguelike elements. This is clearly Konami's take on the popular Dead Cells formula, but does it do enough to make itself stand out from other roguelike games? For the most part, the answer is yes. In GetsuFumaDen Undying Moon, you play as GetsuFuma, the 27th leader of the Getsu clan and a direct descendant of the protagonist from the first game. The player controls Fuma as he descends into the depths of hell on a mission to re-establish its recently broken seal, which is allowing monsters to invade the surface world as well as to find the whereabouts of his lost brother. If you're interested in this game for its dark fantasy storyline, however, you will be sorely disappointed. There isn't much of a story here. Yes, there are a few transitional cutscenes, though these are mostly used to introduce the boss at the end of each level. For the most part, much of the storytelling and details can be found in its intricately designed background art, which uses the gorgeous Japanese ukiyo-e art style as inspiration. The first level is a perfect example of this, showing the protagonist's descent into hell with horrific background animations showing men and women being tortured in many varied and flinch-inducing ways. You can even see the end level boss in the background as you make your way to it, which is a really nice touch. It's this incredibly distinct art style that first grabbed my attention, and it doesn't disappoint. Each level is a beautiful treat for the eyes, like a traditional Japanese water painting brought to life. This is complemented perfectly by the gorgeous soundtrack, which uses a range of traditional Japanese instruments ranging from the haunting biwa strings and vocals to the adrenaline pumping taiko drums and guitar riffs. The only drawback to the traditional 2D animated backdrops is that there is so much happening on screen that sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. This makes it difficult to tell the difference between the foreground and the background, making it hard to recognize enemy attacks in time to dodge or counter. This becomes a bigger problem when you have multiple enemies on the screen at once. In a game where your health is paramount and dying has such severe consequences, this can become annoying. One of the game's strongest features is the wide array of smaller and bigger enemies that you face, each with their own unique attack patterns and rhythms. There is a perfect mixture of both ranged and close quarters combatants that helps to shake combat up nicely. I will say that some enemies and their placements on the map do sometimes feel cheap. Large monsters capable of big swings and doing huge damage are often found on solitary platforms where there's not enough room to do more than leap at them and hope for the best or pick them off from afar. Combined with a double jump and dodge roll mechanic that feels laboured and laggy at times, you will often find yourself struggling to jump to the next platform or missing a dodge or counter and taking damage. It feels like the input and output settings are just slightly off, as such players will often have to preempt enemy attacks. The combat and movement is certainly not as smooth as games like Dead Cells, which feel more refined, so there is definitely scope for improvement here. Still, the sheer variety of enemies available should be commended. Taken straight out of Japanese folklore, their designs are great. One of my favorite features was the bestiary. With each new enemy found, more information and detail is added, providing some interesting insight into their origins and characteristics. I loved this added lore, and as a fan of Japanese folklore, was pleased to see it included. If you think these small enemy designs are cool, then wait until you see the bosses at the end of each level. These bosses are based on Japanese mythical demons, gods, and spirits, and thanks to the gorgeous art direction, are brought to life in colourful and jaw-dropping detail. Each boss is challenging and will likely kick your ass on first attempt, but once you learn their rhythms, they are incredibly satisfying to beat. They're without a doubt the best part of the game, which is good because you will no doubt be facing off against them multiple times. As mentioned previously, GetsuFumaDen Undying Moon is heavily inspired by Dead Cells, and this can be seen in its various gameplay elements. Firstly, there's the collectibles, of which there are many. In fact, there are so many different collectibles up for grabs that it can feel a little overwhelming to start with. First, there are the weapons. Fuma can equip 2 main weapons and 2 sub-weapons at any given time. Main weapons often include swords, spears, a Castlevania-style whip, fan blades, hammers, and so on. Each weapon has its own range, speed, and damage output, and they all feel varied, impactful, and fun to use. Sub-weapons give the player ranged options, allowing them to use bows, rifles, kunai, bombs, and even caltrops. These run on a cooldown counter, so thankfully you don't have to worry about ammo here. Still, it's worth pacing your shots as these cooldowns can feel extremely slow in a life or death situation. The game incorporates an RNG style weapon drops, with these spawning at the beginning of a run or from treasure chests. This cleverly forces the player to adapt on the fly and to use weapons they might not usually use until something better comes along. It can also add an extra layer of challenge to the game that some may find frustrating if repeatedly given weapons they don't like or have a low level of skill with. As you kill enemies, they also drop materials and resources which can be used in both permanent and temporary upgrades. Demon parts are used at the beginning of a run or upon beating a boss to forge and upgrade your weapons, unlocking weapon stat boosts and abilities that can be purchased during a run with special purple wisps. This mechanic is not really explained well in the tutorials, and it took Dante and I a bit of time to figure it all out, but once you do, you will find yourself grinding and rerunning particular levels to collect the necessary parts, especially given that so many monster parts are needed, more so on higher tier unlocks. This does make it strategic in terms of which weapons you want to spend resources into, which is further frustrated by the fact that you cannot choose the weapons you wish to use and are at the mercy of random drops. Enemies will also drop small yellow or green magatama, which can be spent on permanent upgrades in training and secret arts. These can be used to permanently unlock increased health, damage, and reduce the cost of dying, for example losing less monster or spirit materials upon death. During the course of each run, Fuma will also pick up souls from stronger enemies and chests, which can be used to temporarily increase stat buffs in 4 areas: main weapon, sub-weapon, health, and gaining an added potion. In Dark Souls fashion, players do have access to a healing flask, which has a limited number of uses. Of course, this is a roguelike game, so the biggest feature of the game is death itself and how this works. Players will start a run and progress through the levels as far as they can, gaining resources, new weapons, and temporary upgrades along the way. The moment they die, they lose all but 10% of the materials gained and have have to start the run from scratch again with basic level weapons and stats. This provides a very definite challenge to progression. When beating a boss at the end of a level, players are given a choice as to whether they wish to spend their resources and continue to the next more challenging level, or return to base and secure any resources they already have at the cost of restarting the run again. This provides a very definite risk and reward dilemma for players. For those used to roguelike titles, this will feel perfectly natural, but for those less experienced, this may make the game feel grindy, as less confident players will likely grind the first or second level repeatedly until they have enough resources to unlock several permanent upgrades before taking the leap into the next level. One of the features that I really disliked was the fact that upon death, you were forced to rerun the first level and boss again, irrespective of if you had already unlocked the second or later levels. This added unnecessary grind. On a side note, the developers have introduced varying difficulties. Players struggling with Commoner can play the game on Apprentice, which gives them more coin as a reward, which can be spent on buying resources and unlocking better weapons in shops, thus helping them to progress further and quicker in the game. However, this will also spawn less variety of enemies, and the final stage is not accessible. For those looking for replay value and endgame challenge, once beating the game on Commoner, players will gain access to Hero and then Veteran difficulty, which gives them access to more challenging enemies and increased weapon and material drops, allowing them to create the ultimate build. Overall, I enjoyed my time with GetsuFumaDen Undying Moon. I actually found the gameplay loop to be addictive and fun, thought the enemy types and level designs were varied enough to keep the game feeling fresh, and fell in love with the gorgeous art style and soundtrack. Yes, it does have issues, especially in terms of fluidity of movement, and I felt it did have some suspect design choices, but what's here is solid, with plenty of scope for improvement. Overall, I would give the game a 7 out of 10 and would recommend it to anyone that enjoys these style of games. A special thank you to Konami for providing a review copy of the game on the Nintendo Switch. So there you go guys, my first indie review of 2022. Hoping to do many more of these in the future. Let me know what you think of the game, and if you have any questions or thoughts, please share these in the comments below. Hope you have a great week. Take care guys and girls, and as always, happy gaming. Bye guys.